Captain Lee Taeho stood on the bridge of his ship, the New Soul, watching the stars through the main window. His crew was busy with their daily tasks. Lieutenant Park Sora checked the navigation systems while Corporal Kim Do-hyun worked on the engine controls. Everything seemed normal until the alarms started screaming. "Captain!" Sora shouted over the noise. Massive ship approaching fast. Taeho looked at the screen and felt his heart sink. A huge alien ship, 10 times bigger than theirs, was moving toward them. Its dark metal surface was covered with strange symbols that glowed red in the darkness of space. "Try to run," Taeho ordered, but he knew it was too late. Blue beams shot out from the alien ship and wrapped around the New Soul like invisible chains. Their engines stopped working. The lights flickered and went dim. They were trapped. "Sir, they're sending a message," Do-hyun said, his voice shaking. "Put it on screen," Taeho replied. The main screen filled with the image of a tall alien creature. Its skin looked like crystal and glowed with a pale blue light. It had 4 arms and eyes that burned like red fire. When it spoke, its voice was deep and threatening. "Human ship, you are now prisoners of the Vorthon Empire. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in death." Taeho looked at his crew. They were scared but ready to fight. "Stand down," he told them. "We can't win this battle." Minutes later, alien soldiers filled their ship. The Vorthons were even more frightening up close. Each one was twice as tall as a human and carried weapons that hummed with energy. Their leader stepped forward and pointed at Taeho. "You are the captain," the alien said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, I am Captain Lee Taeho," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I am General Kethvar. Your crew will be taken to holding cells. You will come with me." Taeho watched helplessly as his friends were led away. Sora gave him a brave nod before disappearing down the corridor. Do-hyun looked back with worried eyes. Taeho wanted to protect them, but he was powerless. The general took him to the Vorthon ship through a connecting tube. The alien vessel was massive inside, with corridors that seemed to go on forever. Strange lights pulsed in the walls and the air smelled like metal and electricity. Everywhere Taeho looked, he saw Vorthon soldiers marching in perfect formation. They entered a large room where General Kethvar sat behind a desk made of black stone. The walls were covered with images of conquered worlds and defeated enemies. Taeho realized this was a ship designed for war and conquest. "Sit," the general commanded, pointing to a chair. Taeho sat down and waited. He expected to be questioned about Earth's defenses or human technology. Instead, the general surprised him. "Our queen has heard interesting stories about your species," Kethvar said. "She wishes to meet a human representative." "Stories?" Taeho asked. "Reports from our scouts. They say humans fight in ways that make no sense. You lose battles but win wars. You retreat when you should advance and attack when you should run. Our military experts cannot understand your tactics." Taeho felt a small spark of hope. If the aliens were curious about humans, maybe his crew would survive. "The queen has given me orders," the general continued. "You will come to our capital world as her guest. If you refuse, your crew dies now. If you accept, they will be kept alive until the queen decides their fate." It wasn't really a choice. Taeho nodded. "I'll come." The journey to the Vorthon homeworld took several days. During this time, Taeho was given a small room and basic food. Sometimes guards would take him to observation decks where he could see space through huge windows. What he saw made him understand the power of the Vorthon Empire. They passed dozens of ships carrying resources from conquered worlds. He saw planets where the skies glowed red from massive mining operations. On one world, he watched as alien slaves worked in endless fields while Vorthon overseers watched from floating platforms. The Vorthons ruled through fear and strength. Their empire stretched across hundreds of star systems. Every species they encountered had 2 choices: submit or die. Most chose to submit, but Taeho also noticed something else. The Vorthon military moved in predictable patterns. Their ships always flew in the same formations. Their soldiers marched with the same steps. Everything was organized and efficient, but also rigid and inflexible. "Your people value order," he said to one of his guards during a meal. The guard, whose name was Thekmol, nodded proudly. "Order brings strength. Strength brings victory. This is the Vorthon way. What if the enemy doesn't follow your rules?" Taeho asked. Thekmol looked confused. "All battles have rules. The strong defeat the weak. There are no other rules." Taeho said nothing, but he began to understand why the Vorthons were curious about humans. Humans didn't always follow the rules of war. Sometimes they changed the rules completely. On the final day of the journey, Teho was brought to see their destination. The Vorthon homeworld, Vorthak Prime, hung before them like a giant crystal ball. Its surface was covered with massive cities that sparkled in the light of twin suns. Space stations orbited the planet like metal moons, and thousands of ships moved in organized traffic patterns. Beautiful, isn't it? General Kethvar said, joining Teho at the window. This is what happens when a species achieves true civilization. Perfect order, perfect control. It's impressive, Teho admitted, and he meant it. The scale of the Vorthon civilization was breathtaking. Your species is young, the general said. You still think chaos and disorder can defeat organization and planning. The Queen will show you how wrong you are. As their ship descended toward the planet's surface, Teho saw more details of the Vorthon world. The cities were built in perfect geometric patterns. The streets formed precise grids. Even the parks and gardens were arranged in mathematical designs. Everything had its place, and everything stayed in its place. The landing pad was made of polished stone that reflected the sky like a mirror. Hundreds of Vorthon soldiers stood in perfect rows waiting for their arrival. Their weapons gleamed in the sunlight, and their crystal skin caught the light like living jewels. As Teho walked down the ship's ramp, he felt the weight of countless alien eyes watching him. He was probably the first human most of them had ever seen. Some looked curious, others seemed disgusted, and a few appeared angry. A golden vehicle waited to take him to the royal palace. As they drove through the city streets, Teho marveled at the alien architecture. The buildings rose like crystal mountains, their surfaces smooth and flawless. But he also noticed something troubling. There were no signs of other species anywhere. No aliens walking the streets, no foreign shops or restaurants. No indication that anyone but Vorthons lived on this world. The palace appeared ahead of them, a massive structure that seemed to be carved from a single enormous crystal. It reached toward the sky like a frozen mountain, its faceted surface throwing rainbows across the surrounding gardens. The Queen waits inside, General Kethvar said, as their vehicle stopped. Remember, human, you are here because she allows it. Do not mistake her curiosity for kindness. She has ruled for 300 years and has never been defeated in battle or politics. She will decide if your species lives or dies. Teho stepped out of the vehicle and looked up at the Crystal Palace. Somewhere inside, an alien queen was waiting to meet him. His crew's lives depended on what happened next. The future of humanity might depend on it too. He took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance, ready to face whatever challenges awaited him in the halls of power of the Vorthon Empire. The inside of the Crystal Palace was even more magnificent than the outside. Teho walked through corridors where the walls seemed to be made of living light. Strange patterns flowed through the crystal surfaces like slow lightning. The ceiling was so high that clouds actually formed near the top. General Kethvar led him through chamber after chamber, each one bigger than the last. They passed gardens where crystal trees grew impossible flowers, and pools where the water glowed with soft blue light. Everything was beautiful, but also cold and perfect in a way that made Teho feel uncomfortable. Other Vorthons walked through the halls, their crystal skin reflecting the palace lights. They wore robes of different colors that seemed to indicate their rank or position. Some stopped to stare at Teho as he passed. A few whispered to each other in voices that sounded like wind chimes. The Queen holds court in the throne chamber, the general explained as they walked. She will test you before deciding your fate. Many aliens have stood before her throne. Most did not survive the experience. They finally reached two enormous doors made of black crystal. Symbols were carved deep into their surface, glowing with red light. The doors opened silently as they approached, revealing the most impressive room Teho had ever seen. The throne chamber was huge enough to hold a football stadium. The walls curved up and up until they disappeared in darkness above. Thousands of crystal formations hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. At the far end of the room, on a raised platform, sat the crystal throne, and on that throne sat Queen Zephyra. Teho had expected her to be impressive, but the reality was overwhelming. She was tall even for a Vorthon, her crystal skin glowing with inner fire. Her forearms ended in hands that looked both elegant and deadly. She wore a crown that seemed to be made of captured starlight, and her red eyes burned with ancient intelligence. The Queen was surrounded by her court. Dozens of Vorthons stood in organized groups around the throne platform. Their clothing and jewelry showed their importance, but none of them outshone their ruler. "Approach," the queen commanded, and her voice filled the entire chamber. Teho walked down the long aisle toward the throne. Each step echoed in the vast space. As he got closer, he could see the queen more clearly. Her face was beautiful in an alien way, but there was no kindness in it. This was a being who had ruled an empire for centuries through strength and fear. When he reached the platform, Teho stopped and waited. He didn't know the proper way to greet a Vorthan queen, and he refused to bow to a ruler who kept his friends prisoner. "So," Queen Zephyra said, looking down at him, "this is a human. You are smaller than I expected." "We make up for it in other ways," Teho replied. A murmur went through the court. Several Vorthans looked shocked that he had spoken so boldly to their queen, but Zephyra smiled, showing teeth like white crystal. "Indeed? We shall see. I have heard fascinating reports about your species. My scouts tell me that humans fight like no other race in the galaxy. They say you win battles you should lose and survive wars that should destroy you." "We do our best," Teho said simply. "Your best," the queen repeated. "Tell me, human, what is your name?" "Captain Lee Teho of the Earth Defense Force." "Captain Teho, I am going to test you. These tests will determine whether your species is worthy of my attention, or whether you should be eliminated as a potential threat to my empire." The first test came immediately. 3 Vorthan warriors stepped forward, each one carrying weapons and wearing armor. They were huge, muscular, and moved with the confidence of professional soldiers. "Combat," the queen announced. "Defeat my warriors and prove human strength." Teho knew he couldn't win a straight fight against alien warriors twice his size. But the queen had said to defeat them, not necessarily to overpower them. He accepted the weapon they offered him, a staff that hummed with energy, and stepped into the fighting circle. The first warrior attacked with overwhelming force, swinging his weapon in powerful arcs. Teho dodged and retreated, looking for an opening. The alien was stronger and faster, but he fought in a predictable pattern. When the warrior overextended himself on a particularly forceful swing, Teho stepped inside his guard and struck at his knees. The alien stumbled and fell. The second warrior was more careful, but Teho had learned from watching the first fight. He used the alien's own momentum against him, causing him to crash into the wall. The third warrior he defeated by pretending to be more hurt than he was, then attacking when the alien relaxed his guard. The court buzzed with surprised conversation. The Vorthans had expected their warriors to crush the small human easily. "Interesting," Queen Zephyra said. "You did not defeat them through strength. You used their own power against them. This is unusual." The second test was a puzzle. A complex 3-dimensional maze made of light appeared in the air before Teho. He had to find the path from the center to the outside while the maze constantly changed its shape. Teho struggled with this test. The maze seemed impossible, shifting faster than he could think. But then he realized something. The changes followed a pattern, but not the pattern he expected. Instead of trying to memorize the maze, he started to predict how it would change. When he stopped fighting the changes and started working with them, he found the solution. The third test was the hardest. The queen had him brought to a chamber where he was left alone with nothing but basic food and water. For days he sat in the small room while nothing happened. No one spoke to him. No one explained what was expected. The silence and isolation pressed down on him like a physical weight. On the 4th day, Teho realized this was the test. It wasn't about solving a puzzle or winning a fight. It was about endurance, about refusing to break under pressure. He settled into a routine of exercise and meditation, keeping his mind sharp and his spirit strong. After a week, the guards came to take him back to the throne room. 7 days, the queen said when he stood before her again. "Most aliens break after 3. Some last 5. You are still unbroken." "I've been through worse," Teho said truthfully, thinking of his military training on Earth. "I believe you have," the queen replied, studying him with those burning red eyes. "Tell me, Captain, what do you think of my empire?" It was clearly another test, but Teho decided to answer honestly. "It's impressive, powerful, well-organized, but also brittle." The court gasped. Several nobles stepped forward angrily, but the queen raised one hand and they stopped. "Brittle?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "You rule through fear and strength," Teho explained. "That works well when you're the strongest. But what happens when you meet someone who doesn't play by your rules? Someone who fights in ways you don't understand. You think your primitive species could challenge my empire? A tall Vorthan noble demanded. Teho noticed the family resemblance to the queen and guessed this must be Prince Veltar, her nephew. I think, Teho said carefully, that the universe is full of surprises. The strong don't always win. Queen Zephyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she laughed, a sound like crystal bells ringing. Fascinating, she said. You stand in my throne room surrounded by my warriors, your friends held prisoner, your world defenseless, and yet you speak of defeating me. Either you are the bravest being I have ever met or the most foolish. Maybe both. Teho admitted. The queen stood up from her throne, her towering form casting a long shadow over the chamber. I have ruled this empire for 3 centuries, Captain Teho. I have conquered 100 worlds and destroyed 50 species that dared to oppose me. In all that time, only one thing has puzzled me. How a weak, primitive species like humanity continues to survive and grow stronger. She walked down from the platform until she stood directly in front of him. My spies have watched your wars, Captain. They have seen humans defeat enemies with superior technology and numbers. They have watched your soldiers fight impossible battles and somehow find ways to win. They have observed your species turning defeat into victory through methods that make no logical sense. Teho said nothing, but he felt a growing sense of unease. The queen's interest in humanity might be more dangerous than her hostility. I want to understand this human factor, the queen continued. I want to know what makes your species so unpredictable, so adaptable, so annoyingly difficult to eliminate. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer but somehow more frightening. You will stay here as my guest, Captain. You will teach me about human nature, and in return I will decide whether your species deserves to join my empire, or whether it should be destroyed before it becomes a real threat. As guards escorted Teho to his new quarters, he realized that he had passed the queen's tests, but instead of feeling relieved, he felt more worried than ever. The queen's curiosity about humanity might be the most dangerous thing of all. Teho spent the next few weeks as a strange kind of prisoner in the Crystal Palace. His rooms were comfortable and well-furnished, but guards watched his every move. Every day the queen summoned him for conversations that felt more like interrogations. She asked him about human history, human wars, human culture. She wanted to know why humans fought the way they did, why they never gave up even when victory seemed impossible. Teho answered carefully, trying to give her information without revealing anything that could be used against Earth. During his 3rd week in the palace, Teho met another human. The man appeared in his room one morning while Teho was eating breakfast. He was thin and worn-looking, with gray hair and tired eyes, but when he smiled, Teho could see the strength that had kept him alive in this alien place. Captain Lee Teho, the man said in Korean.
I am Bae Youngsik.
I have been waiting a long time to meet another human. How long have you been here? Teho asked, switching to their native language. 7 years, Youngsik replied. My ship was captured during a scouting mission. I was the only survivor. Why didn't they kill you? Youngsik sat down at the table and poured himself tea from Teho's breakfast tray. Because I made myself useful. I work in the palace kitchens now. The Vorthons consider me harmless. Are you? Youngsik's smile became sharper. What do you think? Over the following days, Youngsik visited regularly. He brought news from around the palace and information about the Vorthon court. Through him, Teho learned about the complex politics that surrounded the queen. Prince Veltar, the queen's nephew, believed he should be the next ruler. He had many supporters among the younger nobles who thought the empire needed fresh leadership. General Hexara, the military commander, worried that the empire was growing too large to control effectively. She wanted to consolidate power rather than continue expanding. And what does the queen want? Teho asked during one of their conversations. That's the question everyone is asking, Youngsik replied. She's ruled for 300 years, but lately she's been different, more thoughtful, more curious about things that used to bore her. Like humans? Especially humans. Captain, I think she's been studying our species for much longer than anyone realizes. This isn't just curiosity, she's planning something big. Teho felt a chill. What kind of something? Before Youngsik could answer, guards arrived to escort Teho to another meeting with the queen. But this time, instead of going to her private chambers, they took him to the great throne room. The vast space was filled with hundreds of Vorthan nobles, military officers, and court officials. Queen Zephyra sat on her crystal throne, magnificent and terrible in her formal robes. The light from her crown cast rainbow patterns across the walls. When Taeho entered, every conversation stopped. The silence was complete. "Approach," the queen commanded. Taeho walked down the long aisle as he had weeks before, but this time felt different. The air was thick with tension, and he could feel the hostile stare of hundreds of alien eyes. When he reached the throne platform, Queen Zephyra stood up. Her voice carried easily through the enormous chamber as she began to speak. "Lords and ladies of the Vorthan Empire," she announced. "For weeks I have studied this human. I have tested his strength, his intelligence, and his spirit. I have learned much about his species and their unique abilities." She paused, and Taeho felt his heart pounding. Whatever came next would change everything. "Humans," the queen continued, "are not like other species we have encountered. They do not follow the normal rules of warfare or survival. They adapt in ways that should be impossible. They find strength in weakness and victory in defeat." Prince Veltar stepped forward from the crowd. "Aunt, surely you do not suggest that these primitives pose a threat to our empire?" "I suggest," the queen replied coldly, "that underestimating them would be a mistake. But I have found a solution to the human problem." She turned to look directly at Taeho, and when she spoke again, her words hit him like a physical blow. "I offer Captain Lee Taeho marriage. He will become my consort, and through this union humanity will join the Vorthan Empire not as subjects but as partners." The throne room exploded into chaos. Nobles shouted in anger and disbelief. Military officers argued loudly with each other. Prince Veltar's face turned dark with rage. "The alternative," the queen said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade, "is the captain's immediate execution and the systematic extermination of the human species." The chamber fell silent again. Taeho felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't just a proposal. It was an ultimatum that would determine the fate of everyone he had ever known. "You cannot be serious," Prince Veltar shouted. "To pollute the royal bloodline with alien genetics is unthinkable." "I think," the queen replied, "that you forget who rules this empire." General Hexara stepped forward from the military section. "My queen, with respect, this decision affects more than just the royal family. If you wed this alien, it legitimizes human strength in the eyes of our enemies. It suggests that we see them as equals." "And what if they are our equals?" the queen asked. "What if their strange ways of fighting and thinking could make our empire stronger?" "Then you admit that our current methods are insufficient," Prince Veltar said triumphantly. "You admit that the Vorthan way is not the best way. How can someone who believes that be fit to rule?" Taeho realized what was happening. This wasn't just about marriage or alliance. It was a trap. If he accepted, he would trigger a political crisis that could destroy the queen's authority. If he refused, humanity would be marked for extinction. But there was a third option, and it was perhaps the most dangerous of all. "Your Majesty," Taeho said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "I am honored by your proposal. But among humans, marriage is not decided in a moment. We have customs of courtship that must be observed." The queen raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "A proper engagement period," Taeho said, inventing frantically. "Time for the couple to know each other better before making such an important commitment. It shows respect for the seriousness of marriage." "How long?" the queen asked, and Taeho could see the intelligence in her red eyes. She understood what he was really asking for. 3 months would be traditional," he replied. Queen Zephyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "Very well," she announced. "Captain Taeho and I will observe a 3-month engagement period, during which we will follow human courtship customs. At the end of that time we will wed, and humanity will join the empire as partners." She paused, and her voice became deadly serious. "However, if the captain changes his mind during this period, or if he fails to honor his commitment, the original alternative remains in effect. He will be executed and humanity will be destroyed." The court buzzed with excited conversation, but Taeho barely heard it. He had bought time, but at a terrible cost. In 3 months, he would either marry an alien queen or watch his entire species die. As guards escorted him from the throne room, he caught sight of young Sik among the servants along the wall. The older man's expression was grim, but he gave Taeho a slight nod. Back in his quarters, Taeho sat on his bed and tried to think. He had 3 months to find a solution to an impossible problem. 3 months to save humanity without destroying himself. Outside his window, the crystal city of the Vortons glittered in the afternoon sun. Somewhere out there, his crew was still imprisoned. Somewhere among the stars, Earth continued its existence, unaware that its fate now rested on the shoulders of one man who had just agreed to marry an alien queen. The game had begun, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The engagement period began immediately, and Tejo quickly realized he was walking a tightrope over an abyss. Every day brought new challenges as he tried to navigate Vorthan court politics, while secretly preparing for what he was certain would come. War. Queen Zephyra seemed to enjoy their courtship conversations. She was genuinely curious about human customs, and asked endless questions about Earth culture, family structures, and romantic traditions. Tejo found himself telling her about his childhood, his military training, and his dreams for humanity's future among the stars. "You speak of exploration and discovery," she said during one of their walks through the crystal gardens. "Most species we encounter only think about survival and conquest." "Maybe that's why you find us interesting," Tejo replied. "We want to learn, not just to win." The queen was quiet for a moment, watching alien birds with crystal feathers fly between the trees. "I have spent 3 centuries building an empire through strength and fear, but lately, I wonder if there might be other ways to achieve greatness." These moments of genuine conversation made Tejo's situation even more complicated. The queen wasn't just a tyrant. She was an intelligent being who was beginning to question everything she had built. But questioning the foundation of an empire was dangerous, especially when ambitious relatives were watching for any sign of weakness. Prince Veltar made his move during the 2nd month of the engagement. Tejo was in his quarters when young Sik burst through the door, his face pale with fear. "Captain, you need to know what's happening," the older man said urgently. "Prince Veltar has called for a council of judgment. He's claiming the queen has been corrupted by alien influence and is no longer fit to rule." "Can he do that?" Tejo asked. "According to ancient Vorthan law, yes. If enough nobles support him, they can challenge the queen's right to the throne. The challenge would be decided by combat." Tejo felt ice in his stomach. "Combat between the queen and Veltar?" "No," young Sik said grimly. "Combat between their chosen champions. The queen would probably choose you." The formal challenge came that evening. The entire court gathered in the throne room as Prince Veltar stood before his aunt and accused her of betraying Vorthan principles. "You would marry an alien," he declared, his voice ringing through the chamber. "You would pollute our bloodline and weaken our empire. You have forgotten what it means to be Vorthan." Queen Zephyra listened calmly to the accusations. When Veltar finished, she stood up from her throne, magnificent in her anger. "You question my devotion to this empire?" she asked, her voice deadly quiet. "I who have ruled for 3 centuries and conquered 100 worlds?" "I question your judgment," Veltar replied boldly. "And I am not alone." He gestured to the crowd, and nearly half the nobles stepped forward to stand with him. Tejo was shocked by how many supporters the prince had gathered. "Very well," the queen said. "I accept your challenge. Tomorrow at dawn, champions will fight. If mine wins, you and your supporters will be exiled. If yours wins, I will abdicate and name you my heir." "And the human?" Veltar asked, pointing at Tejo. "If I lose, you may do with him whatever you wish." That night, young Sik helped Tejo prepare for the combat. They met in secret in the lower levels of the palace, where the older man had spent years learning the building's hidden passages. "The prince's champion will be Korthax," young Sik explained as he helped Tejo practice with Vorthan weapons. "He's the best warrior in the empire. Never been defeated. Any weaknesses?" Tejo asked, swinging the energy staff young Sik had provided. "He's arrogant. He always fights the same way. Overwhelming force and brutal directness. He expects his enemies to fight back the same way. Then I won't fight back the way he expects." Young Sik smiled grimly. "That's very human of you." They spent the night preparing, but not just for combat. Young Sik had been secretly organizing the human servants and kitchen staff, people the Vorthans ignored because they seemed harmless. If things went badly, these humans would be ready to help. "How many of us are there in the palace?" Tejo asked. "About 50, young Sik replied. "Not many, but we know this place better than most of the nobles do. We could cause quite a bit of chaos if needed." Dawn came too quickly. The combat was held in the palace's great arena, a circular chamber with crystal walls that amplified sound and light. Thousands of Vorthons filled the viewing platforms, eager to watch the battle that would determine their empire's future. Korthax was everything young Sik had described, huge, muscular, and confident. His crystal skin gleamed like armor and his forearms moved with deadly precision. When he entered the arena, the crowd roared its approval. Tae-ho looked small by comparison, but he carried himself with quiet confidence. The queen had given him the finest Vorthon weapons and armor, but he knew the real battle would be won with tactics, not equipment. Begin, Queen Zephyra commanded from her royal platform. Korthax attacked immediately, his weapons cutting through the air with enough force to split stone. Tae-ho dodged and retreated, staying just out of reach. The crowd began to murmur as the human refused to engage directly. For 10 minutes, Tae-ho did nothing but run and dodge. Korthax grew frustrated, attacking with increasing fury but hitting nothing but air. His perfect technique began to break down as anger replaced discipline. Then Tae-ho made his move. As Korthax overextended himself on a particularly violent attack, Tae-ho slipped inside his guard. Instead of striking with his weapons, he grabbed one of the crystal formations that decorated the arena walls and pulled it down. The heavy crystal crashed into Korthax, stunning him. While the Vorthon champion was dazed, Tae-ho used the arena's own architecture against him. He led Korthax into areas where the crystal walls created echoes and reflections that confused the alien's senses. He turned the lighting system into a weapon, reflecting beams into his opponent's eyes. The crowd was silent now, watching in amazement as the small human used everything except traditional combat to defeat their greatest warrior. When Korthax finally fell, unconscious but alive, the arena erupted in confused noise. "Victory goes to Queen Zephyra," the combat judge announced, but his voice was uncertain. Prince Veltar stood up angrily. "This is not victory. This is trickery. The human did not fight with honor." "The human fought to win," the queen replied coldly. "Is that not what matters?" "You see?" Veltar shouted to the crowd. "She thinks like them now. She values alien cunning over Vorthon strength." The arena exploded into arguments as nobles chose sides. Some supported the queen's victory, while others agreed with the prince that the combat had been won unfairly. In the chaos, Tae-ho noticed movement in the service tunnels around the arena. Young Sik and his network of human servants were taking positions, ready to act if violence broke out. But the real threat came from an unexpected source. General Hexara stepped into the center of the arena, her military uniform gleaming with medals and honors. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who commanded armies. "Enough," she shouted, and the crowd fell silent. "While you argue about honor and tradition, real enemies gather at our borders. The Scarix Republic has allied with the Collective Hive. Together, they plan to invade our space and destroy our empire." Queen Zephyra leaned forward. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," the general replied, "that this entire debate is meaningless. Whether we are ruled by a queen who marries aliens or a prince who clings to old ways, we will all be dead within a year unless we act." She pointed at Tae-ho. "This human's strange fighting methods prove that we have become too predictable. Our enemies know exactly how we will respond to any threat. They can plan around our tactics because we never change." The general paused, and when she spoke again, her words carried the weight of terrible news. "The invasion has already begun. Our outer colonies are under attack. I came here to request permission to deploy our fleets, but I find you all playing politics while the Empire burns." The throne room fell into shocked silence. Then everyone began talking at once, demanding answers and explanations. But Tae-ho was watching General Hexara's face, and he didn't like what he saw there. The general's story might be true, but there was something else behind her words. Something that suggested this crisis was exactly what she had been waiting for. As chaos erupted around them, Tae-ho realized that Prince Veltar's challenge had been only the beginning. The real threat to the queen, and to his own mission, was just revealing itself. The wedding was still scheduled for 2 weeks away, but Tae-ho was beginning to wonder if any of them would live that long. The invasion reports were real, but so were Tae-ho's suspicions about General Hexara. Over the next few days, as the Vorthon military mobilized to defend the Empire, he worked with young Sik to uncover the truth. What they discovered was worse than either had imagined. "She's been planning this for years," young Sik reported during one of their secret meetings. I've been listening to communications from the military command center. The general has been in contact with the Scarix Republic and the Collective Hive for months. She's working with the invaders? Teho asked, though the answer was becoming clear. Not working with them exactly. Young Sik said grimly. She's using them. The invasion is real, but she knew it was coming because she helped plan it. She wants the Empire to face a crisis that only she can solve. Teho understood the strategy immediately. With the Queen distracted by war, General Hexara would position herself as the Empire's savior. When the dust settled, she would be the real power behind the throne, regardless of who officially ruled. What about my crew? Teho asked. He hadn't seen Sora, Dohyun, or his other friends since arriving at the capital. Still alive, but they've been moved to a military prison, Young-Sik replied. The general wants them as bargaining chips. 2 days before the scheduled wedding, the enemy fleets reached the outer edge of the capital system. The invasion force was massive. Hundreds of ships from multiple alien species all united in their desire to destroy the Vorthan Empire. Queen Zephyra called an emergency council session. The great throne room was filled with military officers, noble lords, and government officials, all arguing about how to respond to the crisis. Our fleets are outnumbered 3-1, General Hexara reported. We need to consolidate our forces and defend only our most important worlds. You suggest we abandon the outer colonies? Prince Veltar demanded. I suggest we be realistic, the general replied. We cannot defend everything. We must choose what to save and what to sacrifice. Teho listened to the debate with growing frustration. The Vorthan commanders were thinking in straight lines. Put the biggest fleet in the most important place and hope for the best. It was exactly the kind of predictable strategy that had gotten them into this mess. Your Majesty, he said, standing up from his place among the court observers. The room fell silent. It was highly unusual for a non-Vorthan to speak during a military council. You have something to add, Captain? The Queen asked. Yes, I do. You're all thinking about this wrong. General Hexara's face darkened with anger. A human presumes to lecture us on military strategy? A human who has actually fought outnumbered and won, Teho replied calmly. Your Majesty, you asked me here to learn about human tactics. Well, here's the first lesson. When you're outnumbered, you don't fight the battle your enemy wants you to fight. Explain, the Queen commanded. Teho moved to the central display, where a holographic map showed the enemy fleets approaching the capital system. The Scarix and the Collective are working together, but they're natural enemies. Reptiles and hive insects don't usually cooperate. They're only united by their hatred of you. So? Prince Veltar asked impatiently. So their alliance is fragile. Instead of meeting them head-on, we make them fight each other. Teho pointed to the map, showing how the enemy fleets were arranged. The Scarix ships are faster and more maneuverable. The Collective ships are heavily armored but slow. They're using different tactical doctrines and communication systems. General Hexara stepped forward. Even if that's true, how do we exploit it? Teho smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. We give them something they both want, but only one of them can have. The plan he outlined was complex and risky. It involved splitting the Vorthan fleet into smaller groups, using hit-and-run tactics instead of direct confrontation, and most importantly, making the enemy alliance turn on itself. This is madness, General Hexara protested. You're asking us to abandon everything we know about warfare. I'm asking you to win, Teho replied. Queen Zephyra was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical display. Finally, she spoke. General Hexara, you will implement Captain Teho's strategy. He will serve as tactical advisor. The general's face went pale with rage, but she couldn't refuse a direct order from the Queen. The battle began the next day, what should have been Teho's wedding day. Instead of a ceremony, he found himself on the bridge of the Queen's flagship, watching as Vorthan ships engaged the enemy using completely new tactics. The key to the plan was making the Scarix and Collective fleets compete for the same objectives. When Vorthan ships retreated from a strategic position, both enemy forces would rush to claim it. When they met, their different communication systems and tactical approaches led to confusion and conflict. It's working, Queen Zephyra said, watching as two enemy fleets opened fire on each other instead of pursuing the retreating Vorthans. They're actually fighting, but General Hexara wasn't finished. During the height of the battle, she made her real move. My queen, she announced over the ship's communication system. "I am relieving you of command. The royal family has proven incapable of defending the Empire. Military rule is now in effect. Security forces loyal to the general moved to arrest the Queen, but they hadn't counted on Youngsik's network of human servants. The palace humans had spent years learning every secret passage and hidden room in the Vorthon capital. When the general's troops tried to take control, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to appear and disappear at will. You taught them well," the Queen said to Taeho, as they fought their way through the palace corridors. "I taught them to be human," he replied, using his weapon to disable another of the general's soldiers. The final confrontation came in the throne room itself. General Hexara waited there with a squad of elite troops, confident that she had won. "You cannot stop what has already begun," she told them as they entered. "The Empire needs strong leadership, not royal sentiment and alien ideas." "The Empire," Queen Zephyra replied, "needs to evolve or die." The battle that followed was unlike anything the Crystal Palace had ever seen. Instead of the formal, predictable combat the Vorthons were used to, it became a chaotic struggle where every piece of furniture became a weapon, and every shadow could hide an enemy. Taeho and the Queen fought side by side, using tactics that confused and frustrated their opponents. When the general's troops expected them to retreat, they advanced. When they expected an attack, Taeho and Zephyra would suddenly disappear into the palace's hidden passages, only to strike from an unexpected direction. The turning point came when Lieutenant Sora and Corporal Do-hyun arrived with a squad of rescued human prisoners. Youngsik had freed them during the confusion, and they brought news that changed everything. "Captain," Sora reported as she joined the fight, "the enemy fleets are retreating. Your strategy worked. They're fighting each other more than us." General Hexara's face twisted with rage as she realized her carefully planned coup was falling apart. "No!" she screamed, raising her weapon toward the Queen. Taeho moved without thinking, throwing himself between the general and Zephyra. The energy blast meant for the Queen struck him instead, sending him crashing to the crystal floor. As Taeho lay there, struggling to stay conscious, he saw Queen Zephyra finish the fight with General Hexara. The Queen's anger was terrible to behold, and when it was over, the general would never threaten anyone again. "Taeho," the Queen said, kneeling beside him. "Stay with me. Did we win?" he asked weakly. "We won," she confirmed. "The invasion is over, the general is defeated, and the Empire survives." "Good," he said, and closed his eyes. When Taeho woke up 3 days later, he was in the palace medical center. Queen Zephyra was sitting beside his bed, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked uncertain. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I was hit by an energy blast," he replied, which made her laugh despite everything. "Taeho," she said seriously, "I owe you an apology. I brought you here as a curiosity, a puzzle to solve. I never expected to actually like me," he suggested. "To find someone who could change how I see everything," she corrected. "Your people's way of thinking, your adaptability, your refusal to accept that there's only one way to do things. It saved my empire." Taeho sat up carefully, his body still aching from his injuries. "So what happens now?" Queen Zephyra was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, and it was the first genuinely happy expression he'd seen from her. "Now," she said, "we have a wedding to plan. A real one this time, not a political necessity." "If you're still willing. Are you sure?" Taeho asked. "Your people won't all accept a human consort. My people will learn to adapt," she replied firmly, "just as I have. And those who can't adapt will be replaced by those who can." She stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the crystal city below. "I'm going to change everything, Taeho. The Empire will still be strong, but it will also be flexible. We'll learn from other species instead of just conquering them. We'll value intelligence and creativity as much as strength." "That's a big change," he said. "Yes, it is. And I'll need help from someone who understands how to make the impossible happen." 3 months later, Captain Lee Taeho and Queen Zephyra were married in a ceremony that combined Vorthon tradition with human customs. Representatives from dozens of